Hello and welcome to the QA Therapy podcast. Are you looking to improve your overall testing and quality practices? My name is Sergio Freire and I'm solution architect at Xray.
And my name is Cristiano Cunha, and I'm also a solution architect and test advocate. And we'll be your hosts and QA therapists throughout this series. Artificial intelligence and large language models are transforming many industries, but their potential in exploratory testing, a practice driven by human intuition and adaptability, it's still being explored. We are going to discuss how AI can enhance exploratory testing, its current limitations, and how testers can leverage it to uncover hidden risks in software. And to assist us with this topic, we have a special guest with us, Mark Winteringham. But before welcoming him, let's just see what are the symptoms that you may be feeling that brought you to listen to this podcast. So ask yourself, is your team unsure about AI ML can fit into your testing strategy? Are AI generated results being trusted without proper validation? Or even is exploratory testing treated as an afterthought rather than a core practice?
All these symptoms suggest that your team may either mistrust AI or lack a clear understanding of its role in testing. And while AI holds great potential, it should be approached with caution. Its output can be powerful but require careful validation. And let's dig deeper into diagnosing this issue and explore strategies for leveraging AI effectively alongside the exploratory testing, this wonderful topic, to maximize its value without compromising on quality. And today, as Cristiano mentioned, we are very excited to welcome Mark, a leading expert in technical testing, let's say, test automation, and an international speaker all over the world and the whole universe, who knows. With experience across various sectors, including finance, digital, and public services, Mark is passionate about risk-based automation and shares his knowledge through his blog at mwtestconsultancy.co.uk. He co-founded the software testing clinic in London, offering free mentoring to junior testers, and so great kudos for that. And he's also the author of several books, including the Testing Web APIs and Software Testing with Generative AI, which I actually have read by myself. So we're thrilled to have him on the show today. Welcome, Mark. Are you feeling comfortable on our QA therapy couch?
Yes, yeah. Although, should I be sitting up or should I be lying down on the couch?
Tough question. As long
Yeah,
as
yeah,
you're comfortable, that's fine.
yeah. I am indeed. So, yeah, thank you for having me on.
And now let's start with a simple but tough question. I know because there's like a big misunderstanding out there. And in your perspective, can you briefly define AI and machine learning, what they do stand for?
Sure. So, yeah, it's interesting with everything that's been sort of kind of discussed around this subject is how terms are being sort of used in sort of synonymous manners. So, when we're talking about artificial intelligence, we are talking about, the use of machines to, learn by themselves and, through that learning interact with, the world and different systems and stuff. Typically it's through, the outputs of these types of models and tools that are created tend to be like undeterministic or indeterministic. But what's really interesting is I think a lot of the time when we're talking about AI currently, we are talking about generative AI. So, which is a subfield of artificial intelligence and of machine learning in of itself. So the analogy is that, when you refer to generative AI as AI, it's like saying it's referring to genetics, but calling it biology. It's or chemistry or something like that. AI is a vast field in which there's a lot going on. But yeah, predominantly, what we're looking at these days, what we're talking about a lot in the context of testing is generative AI, which is, the use of tools that have been trained on large corpuses of information to, take some sort of instruction and build a response, predict a response, whether that's text based, image, audio, what have you. So that's it's kind of my sort of broad understanding of it. I think the key thing is to remember is that generative AI is just a field of AI in and of itself. And there's still lots of other things going on, lots of tools out there, lots of practices out there that also can be taken advantage of that aren't in the generative space as well.
The other thing, to connect both of the things I'm going to talk today, is exploratory testing. So, can you also define, on your view, what is exploratory testing?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've been kind of challenging my own definitions of exploratory testing for recently. So typically when I think of exploratory testing, I'm thinking about probably something that's kind of session based, something that's kind of connected to a charter, may follow along the lines of session based test management. So it is a time boxed session in which I have a direction in my testing in the form of like a charter or some sort of simple sentence or some simple risk that I'm focused on, and within that I am basically simultaneously designing my tests, executing them, and observing what's going on in the system. It's unscripted. It's very much rooted in my own creativity and my own use of kind of internal heuristics and mental models. As I'm going through the exploratory testing, I'm using these skills, this intuition, this observation to sort of guide the testing. But going beyond that, I've been going back to some of the work of like Kem Kainer, who and some of the stuff he did with James Bark, talking about like all testing is exploratory. So what I've just sort of kind of talked about is structured exploratory testing, and I think that's probably what we're going to talk about a lot today. But we can think of things like debugging systems. As you're developing your product, interacting with it that way, that is a form of exploratory testing. It's just not quite as explicit and structured as what we would see maybe as part of like a wider testing strategy.
And it's interesting to see that there are actually so many kind of variants of this definition of exploratory testing whenever we go out there. Let me now bring once again the conversation to AI and with all this kind of growing buzz around it. And I see many teams trying to adopt AI or ML tools, and I think many of them don't know exactly why, because it's just not a thing. Is sometimes people come to me and ask me, and I ask them like, "But why do you want AI?" And they don't know. We just want AI. So,
Mm.
do you think every team or project is ready to make this shift to adopt AI or ML tools? Or
Again, so there's a few things to unpack there. Is first of all, talking about the broad gamut of AI. There's so many different applications that can be used. We talk about like AI at the moment as if it's quite a novel thing, but we've been using AI has been used, across a wide range of topics for a long time. But I think the one I always kind of refer back to is the fact that visual comparison tools have been around for at least a decade, if not longer. And they tend to use machine learning and AI in some form for that sort of thing. But I think it goes back to like what you were mentioning a second, Sergio, which it depends on the problem. And I think fundamentally, if you don't know what your problems are, if you can't really identify the pain points that you think AI might help with, then no, you're not ready. But I would argue you're not ready to make any decisions on any types of tooling, regardless of whether or not it's sort of rooted in the sort of kind of AI space. And it's something I've sort of talked about quite a lot throughout my career is that, especially like in the test automation space, people start using testing tools, test automation tools. We're using Selenium WebDriver, for example. Why? Oh, because that's what everybody does. So, yeah, but why? Well, because I'm interested in it, or because my boss told me to do it, or it's part of my goals for the year. So I think that ultimately it's rooted in your own perception of your context. If you don't know what problems you're trying to solve, then no, you're not ready to use AI. And I think that that's important more so with AI is because you mentioned about sort of being what I like to call as having healthy skepticism of these tools. Like, utilize AI, but always be skeptical of whether or not this is actually delivering value. Because with things like hallucinations, with this eagerness to give us responses, we need to have a clear idea of what's right and wrong. And if you don't have that, you're more likely to be kind of hoodwinked by these tools. You'll believe the wrong thing. You'll be taken down the wrong garden path. So yeah, I don't think everyone's ready, but I think it's not because it's skills or abilities with the tooling. It's more of that understanding the context, understanding the problem space first. Once you have that established, I mean, both of you probably work in this space quite a lot, of working with clients who are, we want to use tool X, we want to use tool Y, and but we can't see a reason to fit it. We need to justify the thing. It's like, no, identify the problems first, then the tooling will come next, rather than where can we find a thing to put this tool in.
Yeah, totally. I believe that sometimes we adjust the process to the tooling when we should be doing the other way around. But yeah, that's a struggle that is not only present on AI, but generally in all of the software tools or frameworks that we want to use, either because it's the shiny new thing like AI is now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. But what I try to do is, if there is something shiny and new, is I will set a specific time box problem. I won't try and implement it into my context, but I will sort of kind of, set myself some sort of challenge or some sort of goal to achieve. So I get to learn how the tools work and expose myself to the tooling. But equally, I want to do it in a way that's safe, that doesn't negatively impact the quality of the product or the quality of the work that we're doing. I've always liked like the saying from Marshall McLuhan, which is, we inform our tools and then our tools inform us. If we're not being aware, we're not cognizant of how these tools are influencing us, that's where the danger lies. That's where the risks are. So, sure, you might need to tweak your processes a little bit, but are you doing that consciously, or are you, things like sunk cost fallacy? Are you doing it just because you've been doing it that way for a while?
I don't believe it will be solved with AI, nevertheless. But coming back to AI and through the various conversations we had, even the requirements of our users in Xray, the common demand or the common contributions that we are expecting from AI is generating test cases. It's like the first thing that we talk about and we are talking about. But in exploratory testing, that's not always the ideal because, well, they are not scripted tests. So even if we generate the charter with the help of AI, should be helpful. But in your opinion, how can AI or ML truly enhance exploratory testing practices? What do you see that may be a game changer into exploratory testing?
Well, I think the first thing is we need to think about is we need to move away from this idea of like absolutes. So having a tool that replicates exploratory testing. I've joked before in the past that if we can have an AI that can truly do exploratory testing on the level that a human can, we've got bigger problems than whether we've got jobs. We're getting into general intelligence. We're getting into, we're touching on those fringes of what happens after that. I don't want to get too tinfoily hat about all those sort of things, but I do think that there's something there. However, I do think that if we approach any testing by understanding the sort of the activities, the tasks that make up, even if executing test scripts, there are steps to what we do. I said earlier about exploratory testing being, simultaneously design, execution, observation. There are aspects of that we are better at, and there are aspects of that AI could help with. So in my recent book, Software Testing with Generative AI, there's a whole chapter that explores the use of AI in exploratory testing. And I actually basically put a case study together where I demonstrate how I use these tools to support my exploratory testing. And what I'm doing is I'm thinking about the specific actions, the specific tasks that I'm doing. So you mentioned like AI's generative AI is used quite a lot in the test script generation, but it's also used a lot in terms of like generating scripts, generating data. When I am testing, I need data. When I am testing, I need scripts and stuff to execute things. I might want to, I might have a question around what happens if I hit this endpoint like 1,000 times. What if I click that button 1,000 times? I can use AI to quickly say, this is the bit of code that I'm interested in. Can you write me a script that hits that 1,000 times for me? And then I can run that. So I'm responsible for setting the direction of the testing that I'm doing. I'm responsible for the determining whether or not the output of that testing, I'm applying my oracles and determining if there is a bug or not, or if there's further questions to be asked. But I can use AI to generate certain aspects to accelerate and enhance the testing that I'm doing, either to speed me up or allow me to do things that I couldn't do, like on a technical aspect. There's also aspects around, you kind of touched on it about the idea of sort of charter generation, but I think this idea of using LLMs and using AI as recommenders. So something I talk about in the book is this idea of an area of effect model. So I'm coming up with test ideas, I'm exploring different heuristics and models and things like that, but my own biases will get in my own way. I'll start focusing too much on X, Y, and Z, or I'll run out of ideas. Feeding that sort of information, feeding my test notes in, and then saying, what do you think? What other things could I do? These are the quality characteristics I care about. These are the risks I'm interested in. What would you suggest back? And I could get a list of things, and I could reject all of it, say, no, I've done it, or that's nonsense. But it may spark those additional ideas. So it's that pushing me just a little bit further forward as well. And then finally, as well, like AI is very good. We talk about AI being generative, and we sort of talk about it from this concept of it generating something new, but it's really good at transformation as well. So I've experimented a bit with, like, for example, take my raw testing notes and convert it into a testing story, or into, extract it all and put it into a quick 1 paragraph summary, or into like a certain format of test report. Maybe do some sort of sentiment analysis on it. Do you think that, like, the majority of my exploratory testing means that the quality is good or bad? Again, I review that output and I would change it and modify it. But kind of what underpins all of this is this idea of algorithmic tasks and heuristic tasks. So heuristic tasks are fuzzy, hard to define, hard to describe. That's what makes exploratory testing valuable. The heuristic stuff comes from our critical and lateral thinking, our creativity. I want to keep that as something that belongs to me. But there are algorithmic tasks that I do. There are steps that I have to follow. I have to set up data. I have to get to myself at a certain point in the application. I have to collate information from 3 different sources once I've triggered some sort of event. It's those places that AI can be useful in. So it's using it almost as like a digital assistant to sort of back you up, rather than this idea of it replicating everything that I do. And I truly believe that's where the value can be had, is this sort of happy medium, because I can still evaluate, I can still determine whether or not what's being suggested to me is of value, and choose to ignore it.
We have so many things that we know because we interact with people on the team, we interact with the product, with all the versions of that product in the past, also the feedback from customers. I was going to ask if could we still use like AI and this generative, let's say, a subset of it, to assist us to create, for example, valuable charters for doing exploratory testing, or at least some ideas of these charters. And I know that in your book you exemplify some of these areas also connected with the risks. So from your experience, would you say that that could be helpful to a point?
Yeah, it can be, but then again, it's rooted in 3 aspects. So the book's structured in three different kind of tenets or principles, I believe, that when engaging with AI you need. First is mindset. So, some of the stuff we've kind of touched on, these tools are powerful, but they don't think like us. They are probabilistic machines. That doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that's what they are, and understanding your own context and understanding the challenges that you're facing is important as part of your mindset, and understanding that there's this relationship of using these tools to enhance your abilities rather than replace them. So again, this error of effect model. Then there's the technique side of things. So if you put in a one-line prompt that says, help me test an upload feature, and you're talking to, let's say, like, you're using ChatGPT, or you're using like a Gemini model or Anthropic or something like Claude or something like that. This thing is trained on such a vast amount of information that its weights and balances and stuff are generic, okay? Because it's trained on, if it's trained on everything, you're going to get an answer that's kind of rooted in everything. So you need to understand that there are certain techniques that are required. So this is the second part in terms of your prompt engineering, writing a prompt that is clear and specific, which then brings us to the third part, which is context. And I think this is the key thing that we need to be talking about when utilizing these tools. Yeah, you want to write some test charters, then you need to understand how to engineer your prompts in a way that you can bake that context in, the right amount of context in, so that you get something valuable. If I ask it to just say, generate me some tests for an upload feature, it's going to give me some tests, but they're very high level and they're not rooted in my context at all. Whereas if I start saying, this is the user story, here's a snippet of the code, here are some of the concerns about, like, here's our customer base, here's our quality characteristics, here are the risks that we're interested in, this is the testing we've done before. Feeding that sort of information in to a prompt is going to give you something that's more valuable. And then it comes back to mindset. Despite all these things, do I trust what's being sent to me? Should I use this suggestions? Should I use this information as well? Healthy skepticism. I want to use these things. I want to get something out of it, but I'm not going to accept everything as fact as soon as it comes out. So it's those three principles, I think, that you have to keep in mind. And then, things like generating charters, getting recommendations of ideas and things like that become quite useful for you in your testing.
I think you sum it up pretty well on the usage of AI, because I believe, like you, the context is key, and they lack that part of it, and not trusting the result is also, well, the healthy skepticism is also really, really important, because it shifts the way that we are using tools nowadays. Because when you use tools, you know that the output will be that always, and you trust that output. But when you use tools with AI or ML, they are going to generate different things that probably are not trustworthy 100% of the time. You need to double check that, and I totally agree with you.
Yeah, it's difficult as well. So, like the day we're recording this, Anthropic have just announced that they've now trained Claude 3.5 to be able to interact with computers. And I get a load of emails and sign up to newsletters and stuff, and it's like, it interacts with a computer like a human does, and it's like, no, it doesn't. It's not typing on a keyboard, it's not a mouse, it's not observing the system in the same way as a human mind does. But it's so easy to anthropomorphize these tools. It's so easy, when you hear things like, oh, it uses neural networks, you're like, oh, okay, it's got the word neural in, like a brain. Yeah, yes, it is based on how cell biology works and things like that. It's inspired by that. But in terms of ultimately what's going on inside it, it's probabilities, it's numbers. So you have to keep that sort of stuff in mind. And it's so careful, I think, with like the words and stuff. It's an it. It's not a he. It's not a she. It does not think. It calculates, I think, is and it's those little subtle distinctions, I think, that matter.
Thanks for highlighting that, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, that takes me to the next question. That is, we all talk about how AI and ML are here. You talk a little bit on if it will take our jobs, we will be probably not, or will be more worried about the rest of it than the proper job, because it will be able to do a lot more than just testing in our case. But on the other way around, nowadays, if the teams are just not looking at AI and ML and shielding themselves from that area, do you think that what are the risks for those teams that are not following what AI is doing and ML is doing, and just choosing not to go that path? And I remember one of the sentences that is, AI and ML will not replace you, but someone that uses MI and ML may replace you.
Hmm.
So I will leave you
Yeah.
to answer that.
So there's a lot to unpack there. So going back to what you were saying earlier about, like taking our jobs and stuff, I recently I got quite interested in that as an idea. Like, first of all, sort of, is this accurate? Are people losing? Like, so generative AI as we know it at the moment. So since the launch of ChatGPT has been around, we're getting to, I think, 3 years now. So it's been around enough to have like made an impact. And I wrote a couple of blog posts around this. And the first thing was that, looking at things like redundancies, what are happening in the space of redundancies. Most of the redundancies that happen aren't because an AI tool is replacing the job. The only place I actually saw that was in content writers, and it tended to be like poorly paid content writers. So we're talking about people who are doing transcriptions. So again, it's that transformation sort of space, or things around sort of kind of education. So generating education material, that sort of stuff. Most of it still rooted in, just bad business, people just running businesses poorly, or not, or market forces causing you to go out of business. What was interesting, to go back to your question, initial question, is that a lot of people whose jobs are going, it's not because they're being replaced by AI, but a competitor is using AI to push themselves ahead of the company that you're working at. So that company is losing profits. So I'd say you're more in risk in that space. And it kind of connects to another thing, which is, what is happening to the testing role. So I'm a quality engineer now. I'm not a tester. My role is much more expansive in terms of like what quality means to the team, quality of the work that we do, as well as the product. So I'm involved in a lot of different activities. I see things like we talked about generative test cases. But you think about like the continuous testing model. That's great, but that's just one slice of all the other things I'm doing. If I'm working in A/B testing, operability and observability, I'm trying to improve testability. I'm trying to get people to communicate more. There's so many different things going on, and we're not necessarily seeing things. We're talking a little bit about exploratory testing here, but we're not seeing those things like kind of appear in all the other aspects as well. And then, like, finally, another interesting thing is that, great, we're getting these tools that can generate test cases for deterministic machines, systems. But if everyone's shifting to indeterministic machines, then the test case generation doesn't become massively useful, because you can't run that sort of stuff against an indeterministic machine. So again, there's this: AI is not going to take my job because it's going to replace me. I'm going to no longer be competitive, because the people that the companies that I want to apply to, the places that I want to work for, they're going to be leaning into this space more. They're going to be wanting people who know how to evaluate prompts, how to observe AI systems as they're running. They're going to need to understand like how to break down things like AI agent systems, and how they interact with systems as a whole. There's going to need to be maybe a little bit more of a technical slant in certain places. So I think that's the places. If you're not looking at this from a personal development perspective, or you're not looking at this from a company perspective, it kind of goes back to what you're saying. Someone's going to jump ahead of you, and either that's going to hit your bottom line as a company, and then you're going to have problems there, or it's going to hit you in terms of your abilities within the market workforce, because that company that is more competitive is going to want people who have that understandings and those abilities in that space as well.
I want to ask you if you have any favorite tools for AI and also for exploratory testing that you would like to highlight.
I'm mostly working with, so personally, I'm working a lot with ChatGPT. So I've been building some tools and tinkering with things like agents and stuff like that. And I found actually like some of the like the persona models within ChatGPT to be really useful. So, for example, recently I started building something in serverless, and I've never done serverless before. So, using like one of the JavaScript based trained GPT models that's on their site, I found that really useful to help me get something running on serverless. So that's I found that really useful. I've done some stuff with like things like with Gemini and Vertex AI. So what I've found most interesting is not necessarily working with models via the UI, but via the API. So think using tools like LangChain, I think are really interesting as well. So being able to integrate into model platforms and calling things via an API, I think has been really interesting as well. And it's those sort of things that like kind of thread back into my exploratory testing. So using ChatGPT as a digital pair to help guide me is really useful. Um, but also being able to so I built a little thing, like one of the things I built in the book around AI agents is a agent that will create data for me. So I can go natural language. I need 3 bookings, 4 rooms. Make sure you connect them all together, and it parses that information and it knows which functions or which SQL scripts to run. That sort of stuff I think's really useful and really interesting in that space. But then still, I still love a good bit of Excel. You can't beat a good screen recording tool. Bug Magnet is still fantastic. It's the fusion of these things, the old and new, is where I think the valuable stuff is. We don't need to necessarily reinvent the wheel with everything, um, especially because you don't get any work done because you're just too busy tinkering with the toys.
Yeah, exactly. So, the last question that will touch base a little bit on your last answer, but let's see if you have anything to add to that. So, during your last book, Testing with Generative AI, what did you find that was surprising and most interesting finding regarding that? Then that can be good or bad.
Let's see if I can do one good and one bad. So
Yeah.
I'll do the bad one, which I think it's not necessarily something new, but it is still striking. Is like I said, it's that how easy it is to start trusting things blindly. There are moments, even now, like I've been playing with these tools now for like 2.5 years and stuff. It still astonishes me the ability. I built something recently and showed it to a fellow quality engineer, and both of us were just bowled over by like the way that it could respond when prompted with the right sort of things. And I suppose that is good and the bad is it's these tools ability to infer what you're doing based on the information that you provide it, but it is still rooted in what you're explicitly providing. So if you are, it's garbage in, garbage out. So there's the negative side of things on there. I have to say, like today, looking at that Anthropic stuff around getting the model to interact with with the tool, um, I've seen other testing tools out there that are doing interesting stuff around converting natural language into test steps and things like that. I think there's, it's. I find myself looking at that stuff, going, how did you do that? Like, I really want to dig into that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's ultimately like as I wrote the book, coming up with these ideas and then going, can it do this? Can it do this? Can it do that? Because when I wrote this book, I didn't unlike my first book where I had a clear idea of what I wanted to write. This was more of a, well, I've got these ideas, but I don't know if it can do X, Y, and Z. And most of the time, it delivered, and it delivered, first time in a pretty impressive way. So I think, yeah, I guess it's a bit of a sort of woolly answer, but it's just the opportunities of working with LLMs and with generative AI. I feel like there's still so much more to uncover and to research further into, which I think that's what we need to do as an industry. We need to, you know, stop arguing about whether these things are good or not and start thinking about where they could be of use. Go there.
I lied before because I want to make you another question. Now, a quick one. Just wondering. Let's say if writing this second book was, let's say, has been easier experience than the first one.
It's been different. So, as I say, the first book, I went into that, I'd never written a book before, but I'd done a lot of teaching in that space, in API testing space. So I knew what I wanted to cover. So that was more learning to write a book. Whereas this one, it was like, I know how to write a book, I know the process. It's more learning to research, learning to learn on the fly, and then quickly turn that into to other stuff. I would say I've enjoyed this one a bit more, although admittedly the first book I had, we had our second child halfway through it, so it's all a bit of a blur anyway. whereas this one's gone a bit more smoothly that way. But I'm a lifelong learner. I love researching things. I love discovering new things. I just love learning. So this book's been an opportunity to do that, and that's ultimately, if you're going to take one thing away from what I'm saying, is don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to try new things and learn from them. You make a decision after that, but don't go in going it's all rubbish or it's all glorious. Make your mind up. Like, just be open minded, have fun, and then make your decisions after that.
It was really a pleasure. So thank you for being here with us and
Thank you for
help
having
us
me.
uncover more about AI and all these related topics and subtopics, and also connecting the dots with exploratory testing. It was really, really insightful.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for having me. It was really fun.